Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government and political correspondent. Today we have another political candidate because it's election year and election season, and our candidate this time is for Congressional District, 7th Congressional District, Margaret Engebretson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So we have another campaign, and this comes around every 2 years for Congress. We don't get a lot of congressional candidates, though. I don't know many terms Sean Duffy's been here. We always invite him, but he hasn't been able to make it on. So thank you for accepting the invitation. And just why don't we start by giving the viewers a little background about who Margaret Engebretson is, where you come from, and then we'll work up from there with education and other things.
Sure. So I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and my folks bought property on Balsam Lake when I was a kid. And so I spent all my summers in Balsam Lake, which is in Polk County, just about an hour north of here, and went to school there. And then when I graduated from high school, I enlisted in the Navy and spent 3 years on active duty as an electrician's mate on board the USS Samuel Gompers. And once I got honorably discharged, I went into the Naval Reserve for 10 more years, and then the Minnesota Air National Guard, the 148th Fighter Wing out of Duluth, for 11 more. And I retired in 2015 as a Master Sergeant with 24 years of service. And also after I was discharged from active duty, I hired on with the Burlington Northern Railroad as a union locomotive electrician, and then later a union train dispatcher. And then I left the railroad to go to college at UW Superior, and I majored in history and I minored in business. And then I had to save up some money, and so I worked as a corrections officer in Duluth for St. Louis County up there for about 2.5 years. Okay. And then I went to law school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I graduated from there in 2010 and moved to Balsam Lake, where my folks ended up retiring, and which has always been home base for me. And I opened up Engebretson Law Office, and I focused most of my small solo general practice on guardian ad litem work, which is, in Wisconsin, they're licensed attorneys who advocate for the best interest of children and disabled adults. Wow,
so that's quite the background. You've got a full military career, and then sprinkled on top of that some union work, and then going back and getting your degree. So you've described your law practice. What about your political experience? What have you done there?
I had no political experience prior to running for Congress. In 2015, I said I retired from the military. So that was when I felt, you know, I was free of being kind of a nonpartisan, and the 2016 elections was a moment for me, like thousands of people across this nation, that were concerned and are concerned about the direction of our nation. So I became a Democrat at that time, and I joined the Polk County Democratic Party in January of 2017, and I shortly thereafter became the secretary of our county party and a delegate, and I also organized for the state party for a few months and basically learned about politics, and the journey began.
So you've been involved in partisan politics less than 3 years, and member of the Democratic Party a little over 2 years, huh?
That's right.
Okay. So what is it about, why are you running as a Democrat then? What is it about? Do you adopt their whole platform, or what are the issues that you feel cause you to identify more with Democrats?
Well, for many years, there has been only two parties, Republicans and Democrats. And I'd say prior to the 2010 wave where Republicans took over the majority in Congress, something has shifted within the parties since then. And I've noticed an increase of hyperpartisanship and toxic politicking. And quite frankly, the Republican Party, in my view, has drifted away from what I've known it to be my entire life. My father, in fact, ran as a Republican for Congress when I was a little girl. And the party has changed. So has the Democratic Party. And their platform, I've read it, and I'm in alignment with a lot of it. Not all of it, of course, but I have my own views about things. But I think where our parties are undergoing change, and I wanted to be a part of that. So that's one of the reasons I joined instead of staying on the outside.
Okay, very good. So why run for Congress? That's your first political office attempt, correct?
That's right.
All right. So other than within the party, as you mentioned before, but not school board and no state representative or anything like that, straight for going for Washington. Why is that?
These are not ordinary times, and this is not a normal election year. I think we can all be in agreement about that. The situation in Wisconsin is that in 2010, there was this wave election that I previously mentioned, and the Republican Party took over the Assembly and the State House and took over Wisconsin, and they redistricted it in a severe fashion. It was gerrymandered. In fact, there was a case that went up to the Supreme Court about the unconstitutional gerrymandering. The Supreme Court has since kicked it back down to the state of Wisconsin. Now, because of the way things have played out, a lot of these seats were lost in Wisconsin for Democrats.
Okay.
And that includes school boards, county boards, village boards, assembly seats, state senate, all of it, right? So there isn't much of a bench. So who are the people that are gonna challenge the Republicans that are currently holding office? Like I said, there's not much of a bench. So I evaluated the situation. A fellow Polk County Democrat is running for the 28th Assembly seat where I live, and the 10th Senate seat was won in a special election by Patty Schachner, and then there's the congressional seat. So I evaluated very seriously my qualifications and my ability to do the job itself. I did not take this lightly. I spent an enormous amount of time, several months, studying what it means to be a member of Congress, what do they do, what kind of educational background and professional background and life background is conducive and helpful for a member of Congress. And it was only after months that it occurred to me that the life I'd live, even though I hadn't planned to run for Congress, I think would be very beneficial at this time and in this place and for the people of the 7th Congressional District.
Well, we've been hearing on TV that there are quite a few more female candidates, and sprinkled in there, I've seen video and heard from several female candidates that have military backgrounds. So that's an area where you thought that made you qualified to be able to run for this.
Well, I think it doesn't, per se make me qualified, but what it has done has shaped my entire life. I enlisted in the military because I feel a deep sense of obligation and duty towards this country. I love it very, very much. And the way I chose to serve was by being in the military. And as I mentioned earlier, these are no ordinary times. So there are people of all walks of life, of all backgrounds, of all size of bank accounts that are stepping forward in this time to lead. Because the problem in this country and the crisis that we're enduring right now is a crisis of leadership and a crisis of unity and a crisis of direction. And so while it doesn't make me qualified just because it's on paper, it makes me qualified because we need people who are doing this kind of thing and leading this country and taking these positions for the right reasons.
Okay, well, that's very fair. I didn't mean to insinuate just the fact that you've been in the military itself, but what I want to hear was what kind of values did you get from the military, and whether it was work ethic or whatever, that you feel transfers to serving in Congress?
Well, some of the most beneficial things is that working with others. I've been in several commands. I've been deployed to for example, down to the Mexico-American border under George W. Bush. I have responded to hurricanes in Guam. I went on a Westpac when I was on board my ship, and I went to Japan. And I've encountered a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. And many times it's high stress. And there are certain traits that are beneficial that you can learn in the military, and that's resilience, stick-to-itiveness, determination, honor, courage, commitment, duty. Those things matter.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So we got what has motivated you to run now as a candidate. What are some of the things that you feel, you talk about this crisis that we're in now, what are some of the issues that you think need to be dealt with that maybe aren't, or that should be dealt with differently? How would you improve?
Sure. So the overarching issue is the state of our democracy. Over the last several decades, trust in our government and that we're going in the right direction, and that people feel that their needs and wants are being represented and taken care of by their government. And that's a really worrisome trend that we're in. And you couple that with, like I mentioned earlier, the hyper-partisanship and the toxic nature of what's going on in this country. So I think people that get into Congress and resolve to try to get things done and start working on long-term issues, such as our healthcare crisis. Healthcare costs have been outstripping inflation for a long time. The health insurance industry and the companies have got us over a barrel. So we are paying extremely high premiums in many areas of this country for diminishing results and access to health care. The mortality rate of Americans and women that give birth is declining. We have older folks that are in fear of losing their Medicare and Medicaid in their time of need towards the end of life. So what we need to do is transition to a Medicare for all public health insurance program so that everyone is guaranteed coverage from the time they're born till the time they die.
Now, there's some that think that this Medicare for all is just way too expensive and something that will break the taxpayers. The government's already running, federal government in particular, already running a huge deficit. So how would you respond to those criticisms?
Well, first of all, we're in this terrible deficit crisis because of that tax bill that exploded it in December of last year. But yes, this costs money. Nothing is for free. But if you take a look at the American healthcare system, we are paying twice as much as the next nearest country that offers universal healthcare coverage. So you look at where the points are why we're paying too much. It's because we have a private health insurance industry driven by profit. And we have a drug industry that has hardly no constraints on it to keep drug prices reasonable. And what's happening is this private industry for profit is being taken advantage of. We're being taken advantage of. So the way to get rid of this and fix it is get it down to a public health insurance program, which the administrative costs are much lower than the private health insurance industry. And this will bring overall healthcare costs down over the entire system. We will save money. We will save money by doing this.
Okay. And by saving money, you're saying not necessarily the tax dollars per se, but when you combine it with what folks are paying for private premiums and private health care plans, the coverage for families, if you were to add that to what you're paying in tax dollars, then you would be saving money.
Absolutely. So right now, the premiums are outrageous in many cases. Our small business owners are really struggling to purchase their own insurance and much less hire employees. So we're just getting gouged here with these premiums and these drug prices. Let's make it a not-for-profit endeavor, which is healthcare. Everybody needs it. We all benefit from it. So let's make this transition.
So the last couple presidents have talked about doing it. As you know, Medicare Part D, which is the prescription part, was added under George W. Bush, and but the government was not given the ability to negotiate those prices.
Yeah, that was a congressman actually put that in that bill because I presume it was one of, he was induced by that by donations. We've got a campaign finance problem in this country too.
Would you reverse that idea of the government not being able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies?
Absolutely. Once we transition to this public health insurance program, we will be a really big customer for this, and we should be able to use our bargaining power and the quantity that we'll be purchasing and negotiating over to bring prices down. We will all benefit from this.
And this would be one way of getting it, because I think we pay 5 to 10 times more for the same drugs as in Canada or other similar
why do we stand for this? Why do, it's outrageous when you actually look at the numbers, and it's because our Congress and the people that are representing us are captured by special interests and big money. And our campaign finance situation is such that you need millions of dollars to run a competitive race. Now, I'm not doing that. My opponent has that. I'm doing it differently.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because how can you run for Congress without getting PAC money or without getting some big donors, because it costs millions of dollars to run for Congress?
It does. So I'm doing it the old-fashioned way, grassroots, because to affect long-term change and engagement with citizens, you go out and you talk to them, and you ask them questions, and you ask about their life and what are their challenges. And I have driven all over the place, thousands of miles since February, campaigning, and it's to get to know them as well as, to let them get to know me.
I want to ask you about that, but before we do, on this idea of money. So you're not taking the pharmaceutical money or the NRA money or so forth? You're not pursuing those kind of endorsements?
I refuse.
Okay, and why is that?
Principle.
Okay.
How can I advocate for a cleaner, more ethical, honorable government and then turn around and take corporate PAC money?
Okay.
Why would anybody trust me after that?
So you're doing it the old-fashioned way. What are you learning when you're going to the doors of these people and meeting folks one-on-one? What are they talking about?
Several things. I'm concerned about a lot of folks feeling overwhelmed in their lives for whatever reason. Some people are working more than one job, and they're barely getting by, and they're worried about health insurance, and they're worried about their kids and their schools, and what's going to happen next year. What if I get sick? What if I can't work? So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And there's a lot of anger too, that why is it that after the 2008 financial crash, our wealth has just seeped away from our rural communities, and it hasn't returned in many areas? Why is that? And why is it that huge corporations like Walmart can open up these gigantic stores, pay their employees a non-living wage, and then have them go on, assistance, which of course they need to survive, and why are we subsidizing them? Why are we allowing corporations to do that? They're making record-breaking profits right now. We are allowing that because corporations and special interests have captured our Congress.
Okay, so that's, it sounds like behind healthcare, then reforming our campaign system and the PAC money that goes with it. What's another issue that you're hearing, either at the doors or that you're making a point of talking to folks about?
Well, I know a lot of people are very concerned about climate change and our environment and our water. In the state of Wisconsin, the regulations have been rolled back, and now it's happening on a federal level. Representative Duffy is one of those that is fighting for removing regulations, the Clean Power Plan. And that the regulations that protect our air and water and the effects of climate change are becoming disastrous, and they're costing us lives and money.
But, well, when you say costing money, wouldn't it reduce the cost of goods if private corporations didn't have to pay so much to fulfill all these regulations, and it would allow the price of their goods they're producing to be reduced?
Well, that's the presumption that they'll pass off that savings to customers, which doesn't really happen. It goes into their earnings and stocks and buybacks.
Well, what, as far as the regulation, though, a lot of people argue it's unnecessary and that the climate change things is just a hoax made up by China.
That's really unfortunate. That's really unfortunate that the fossil fuel industry has been so successful in propagating that falsehood with junk science and untruths. That's what that is. And it's disastrous. And we have members of Congress that deny climate change when the majority of climate scientists say this is so. I mean, I was born in '71, and anyone that's my age can tell you our winters are different here. You would have to, I don't know how you would not be able to notice this. And if you look at the 300-year events and 500-year extreme weather events that we're having every few years now, this is what's going on. And it is tearing us apart. We just had that horrible hurricane hit the Panhandle in Florida, Hurricane Michael. And that's going to cost us billions and billions of dollars.
All right, and well, we've made it 22 minutes into the interview. We hadn't mentioned President Trump, but the climate change report just came out. I think it was authored through the UN, and as most things that come out of the UN for the Trump administration, they're dismissive of the report. In fact, I don't even know if they addressed it at all, let alone be critical of it. But how would you combat that? Because if you were elected, President Trump would be in the White House. How would you be able to work with him, given your belief system and some of the values that you've mentioned?
So you can work with people if you don't agree with them. That's how things are supposed to work. But in President Trump's case, his presidency and his administration has been a series of scandals and problems for this nation. The Congress has abdicated its duty to provide meaningful oversight. There are investigations that we need to conduct because this is our government, and he has put people in charge of our agencies and enacted policies that are out of step with American history and our values. So, for example, this family separation crisis, where there is lots of evidence that the Trump administration enacted these policies not based on any set of data that it would improve security, but they did it, just to do it, and there's no plans to follow through.
Well, I thought they argued that there would be a deterrent, so that if they start doing this, then people know not to enter this country because their children may be taken away.
There is no evidence to suggest in our past that that would work.
Okay. But wouldn't, there's a lot of people that support President Trump that say, well, if they don't want their children taken away, they shouldn't try and enter this country illegally. They should do it just legally, and they're fine with immigration as long as it's done legally.
These are fundamental differences of values. For me, it is absolutely unacceptable and reprehensible to tear apart families. Period. Mm-hmm. You just don't do that sort of thing. This has happened in autocratic regimes in other parts of the world. And we see in our world history what happens when we act cruelly. There are episodes in American history where we have acted cruelly.
So you would address the immigration problem differently rather than ordering the Attorney General to take the young children away from their mothers and fathers. What would you do to reform than our immigration system, because something's broke with if we have 12 million plus people here illegally.
Right. So immigration is one of those really emotional topics for a lot of people, and it makes it really difficult to come together and resolve things. Our Congress has come close a few times in enacting some immigration reform, but you know, hard, immovable members of Congress have dug in their heels and will not even talk about it because they're anti-immigration. And it is unfortunately derailed our efforts in the past to work in a bipartisan fashion. So yes, you're right. It is obvious we have 11, 12 million undocumented immigrants in this country. So what are we going to do? We can't stay with the status quo because we know that that's not working. The second option is to try to deport all those millions of people, which is not only not practical to do, and
wouldn't you at least start deporting though the people that have committed crimes when they've been in the United States?
Right. There is definitely a difference between immigrants that are here committing crimes. I'm talking about the ones that aren't, which is the majority of them.
Right.
So it's not feasible to deport all of these people. Our economy would collapse. They contribute billions of dollars to our economy every year, and they're paying taxes, and they're paying into Social Security, and they're paying all these things.
There's some people that would argue that our economy would improve because all these people who are here illegally would not be taking our resources, like going to the schools and getting, you know, using our tax dollars to educate them and our healthcare dollars and so forth.
They would argue that, but I would like to see what facts and data they would have to support that.
Okay, so you don't believe that undocumented aliens are being educated in our schools or are, you know, taking advantage of our welfare programs and so forth?
I would say that this issue needs to be dealt with in a realistic way. So they are contributing, and they are already in our communities, and they're already working down the road. We
only have about 2.5 minutes left, but you mentioned the tax plan, and I just saw a survey today that it's still wildly unpopular, even though there are some people that benefit greatly under the tax plan that passed through Congress. So how would you fix it, if you will?
I'd repeal it.
Just outright repeal?
Repeal and replace it. Because that tax bill was written by lobbyists and special interests and corporations. Because during the Newt Gingrich revolution of the 90s, they cut back nonpartisan staff in Congress to write bills for representatives. So now it's been outsourced to private interests, and you get a tax bill like this, which is heavily skewed towards the ultra-wealthy and corporations.
And there's some that say that this was passed in order to get the deficit real high to then have an excuse for then cutting a lot of social programs.
Exactly. We've seen this before.
All right. So with that, what about the social programs? Because isn't Social Security not even part of the budget anyway? I mean, it's separately funded. What would you do with Social Security? Because people have been kicking the can down the road for, well, over 30 years since the last time it was reformed, when Reagan and Tip O'Neill did it in the early 80s.
I think Social Security is the most beloved social program in American history, and it's also the most successful. And I think that the rhetoric surrounding it is mostly untrue and scaremongering.
Well, except you can't deny that the number of people, because of the baby boomers, that are on Social Security have greatly increased, and the number of workers, because of the reduced birth rate, there's a lot fewer workers that are supporting the Social Security.
Right.
So something needs to be done in order to extend the life of the Social Security. How would you do it? By just taxing more, or by raising income limits? What would you do?
This is a very well-designed program. So we've known this baby boomer bulge was going to be working its way through the system, right?
Right.
We have been planning for that. This program needs adjustments as it goes because of different inputs.
Right. It was adjusted in the 80s.
So
right.
we can raise the cap on the tax for that, right? And there's another option that we can start taxing unearned income. Now, this is a program that everybody gets, everybody pays into. That's why it's so successful and everybody wants to keep it.
Well, there are some people that would put income qualifications on it, so that if you make, in your retirement, you're making $1 million a year, you don't need Social Security. What would you say about that?
I would say that is not true. If they paid into Social Security, they get Social Security.
Okay.
I don't care how wealthy they are.
Would you tax it if they had other income, whether it's unearned or earned income?
Whatever we do to Social Security, we do for everyone. Okay. Because we don't want to continue to pit Americans against one another. People from this income bracket against this income bracket. What do you have going on over there? How come you have so much? How come you're getting more benefits than me? How come this and that? And that is one of the underlying things that's going on in this country, is because we are being pushed into being suspicious of each other. And what we really have going on here are laws that are written in such a way that is creating the biggest income and wealth gap in this country's history. This is a problem, and the outcome, we must address this now. That's why a lot of people there's an underlying anger out there. Wages haven't grown. Benefits are being chipped away. And Social Security, make it work. It doesn't need much adjustment.
Right.
Now, Medicare is a whole nother issue.
Right, and now I have to stop you there only because we've run out of time. And I see that you were starting to get on a roll, and I'm sorry that we have to stop there, but is there anything that you would like to have a chance to just wrap up as far as why you would like the voters to consider you? Because you've already recognized that there's people who are at the extremes and they're going to be solidly one for one party or the other, but there's still what I think is close to the majority of the people who are persuadable. So what would you say to them as far as why they should support Margaret Engebretson for Congress?
I would say we've had our current representative in there for 8 years, and for most of that time he's been essentially pretty absentee with short notice town halls and lack of representation for what the needs and wants of the people of the 7th are. And I just want people to know that I'm running because I want to help. I'm one of them, and we can do better. And we need someone in Washington that will fight for those resources to bring home, and also that when I go to Washington, I won't, change my, who I'm fighting for once I get there. They will always be who I will be representing, and only them.
All right. Very good. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate that. And thank you for watching Western Wisconsin Journal. We encourage you to research the candidates, listen to where they stand on the issues. I hope that this segment was helpful in getting to understand one of the challengers to current office holder. And if anyone knows Sean Duffy and would like to get a message to him to be willing to come on the show, that would be great. So we thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on to the show, Margaret. Good luck in the election, and keep watching.